will now move on to item 10, report on the status of the probation department, which was held by Supervisor Horvath. For members of the public joining us remotely to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature if you were online or press star 3 if on a telephone. Robert Arcos, Chief Deputy, and Sheila Williams, Chief Deputy, as well as Guillermo Viera Rosa, Chief Probation Officer, are available for questions for the departmental speakers. Please state your name and title for the record when you address the board.
Thank you. Supervisor Horvath, you held the item. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anything that the department wants to present before I get into questions?
No, we're happy to
Okay, just get into the discussion. Yes. Okay, thank you. I understand that all of probation's pools are now open, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm sure, most importantly, our youth are excited to know that. So I do understand that that comes with the impact of probation staff having to get special training because they are serving as lifeguards. So how does that impact the department's staffing model in terms of compliance or other services?
Yeah, no, that's accounted for, and it is a stressor, and we look forward to other partnerships, for example, with DYD to train non-employee as well, but it is, that's not one of the major sources of strain.
Right, so I think we initially started off, I'm sorry, Sheila Williams, Chief Deputy Admin. We initially started off working with Parks and Rec to provide lifeguard services for our pools. Unfortunately, that did not come to fruition this year, but we will continue to work with them to see if we can have them stand up a lifeguard program, and I think we want to do some additional types of services and activities with them with respect to the pool. Right now, we are using our internal staff to address that issue, and of course, that does impact our staffing.
But just to, because I want to make sure you get a very precise, the reason it's only partial impact is because it's recreation. We already account for folks being out to observe recreation. So and then we also use a lot of overtime to do that portion. So I never want to leave here saying it doesn't impact our staffing model, but when I take a look at all of the different things that do, this isn't a major one. Yeah.
Did you want to add to that?
I just want to add one thing. Robert Arcos, Chief Deputy Operations. All 5 pools began operational the first week of July with our staff that wasn't certified. It's a very, very difficult lifeguard certification process. It has been really well received. One of the things that we are missing as we talk a little bit about programming is that some of our kids don't know how to swim. So to break up the day to make sure that we are getting the kids some swim lessons would be really appreciative. The department would also like to thank Supervisor Hahn for a donation of 300 swim caps to Los Padrinos. We are working on acquiring other swim caps for the other facilities as well. So.
Great, thank you, and I'm glad to hear that we were able to find a way through the department to accommodate this, and thank you for pushing our staff to pursue that training so that way our young people could enjoy the facilities. And it's helpful to hear what else comes with that programming. It's not just as simple as making sure there's a lifeguard there, but the materials and equipment as well as the training is all important. So thank you for highlighting that. A BSCC inspection of LP is scheduled to happen, I think, in the next couple of weeks. As of last week, our population was higher than the 175 person goal that was set. So what are we doing to make sure that we're in compliance and address what goals we're trying to achieve when it comes to that upcoming inspection?
Yeah, I'll start, Chief. So as of today, our numbers at Los Padrinos are at 241. And it is the summer months. I wanted to make sure that we looked at July 28, 2025. Our population, absent the girls, for boys was 269. So these summer months sometimes are very unpredictable on the types of charges that are coming across the county through law enforcement or through warrants, et cetera. The BSCC phone call today is at 2 o'clock to discuss that very topic around when we will be prepared for the inspection within the month of August. So we are hopeful we're going to have a very robust conversation around what that looks like, as well as some feedback from the Barry J. Neidorf cap that they just completed as well.
Okay.
So I just, sometimes it's useful to go back to the reasons for those numbers. In this particular case, the court has continued to provide guidance. And so with respect to the depopulation plan, one should bear in mind that the reason for the depopulation is based on this principle that the lower the population, the sooner we would be ready for a reinspection. The court has indicated that a reinspection should take place by the end of August, irrespective of whether those numbers had been met. They've further provided guidance to seek, which we've already started, input from BSCC to utilize Dorothy Kirby also as a juvenile hall. Both of those things, depending on how they would have an impact. So for example, if in fact we go down the line, as the court has indicated their preference, to use Dorothy Kirby for predisposition youth that may be developmentally disabled, as was in the original plan, that would have a small effect on moving and lowering the population from LP. And then dependent on whether BSCC finds that we're in compliance at Nydorf, there may be some more space there for the juvenile hall there. From population that could go from LP. So there's two things that are happening that could still drive down that population, but nonetheless, the reinspection should take place irrespective of what the population is by the end of August.
Okay, I know that one of the reasons we moved our our girls and gender expansive youth from Dorothy Kirby to Campus Kilpatrick, and now we have seen that there have been incidents involving placement youth, which, sort of begets the question around need for additional services and support. And some of these issues are new, given the transfer to that new location. So are you planning to adjust the services made available to young people? If you're looking to repopulate Dorothy Kirby, is that a possibility? Are you working with DMH or DCFS to address this? What are we going to do to, I feel like we moved our girls and gender expansive youth from Kirby to Campus Kilpatrick in hope that we were trying to solve some issues, and Campus Kilpatrick was a place where we could have taken on more population of boys, which is sort of the challenge at LP. So how are we going to get there given the movements we've made?
It's definitely a work in progress. At no point have we stopped thinking about it, and we have Superintendent Binion working with the other departments on what other services can be provided there. I think that the level of services, for example, from DMH, they've provided testimony before, is higher there than it is at any of our other sites. So it's not due to a lack of attempting to provide services from other departments. It's just that we've had to face the reality that we have a population that was involved in, I'm trying to say this in the nicest way possible, while the predisposition girl population was at LP, many of the same things that we're seeing at Kilpatrick were occurring. It's just that it was within the larger context of LP. For example, the acting out, the incidents of violence, they were occurring at LP in the girls section. And folks that visited would tell you that's a tough unit. And we haven't been able to fully wrap our arms around, even in this new campus, on how to undo that. Some of the theories that we had in terms of providing an environment that was better suited to provide it, to have the population broken up into smaller, just hasn't borne the fruit that we thought it would. And so we continue to work with our partners, DYD, with the MH, to bring more services there. Still think it's the right model. We simply haven't refined it sufficiently.
And of the 50 youth currently at Kilpatrick, how many are charged with non-felony or non-707B charges?
I don't have that number, Supervisor. The number this morning at LP is 48. And of the 48, that includes 3 of our girls that are there are on SYTF, and we have another 16 in placement and another small number in camp. So the juvenile hall number is somewhere around 20 or less, and I can't tell you how many of those are 707B offenses, but I can get that information for you. But we have seen, both at LP and at CVK, a number of youth that are being remanded to the court on warrants. And for the girls in particular, some of the warrants are also misdemeanor warrants. And the issue at hand is Superintendent Binion really goes very quickly into having MDT meetings with the team, and also to reach out to the court. In these particular cases, some of these girls are hard to place. It's hard to place, to find a suitable placement for them to relieve them there. So then the outcome is that they have to stay with us until we can find a suitable placement for them.
Is there a different kind of facility that we need to be investing in? Or when you say they're hard to place, what kind of setting is needed?
I think that's a great question for us to continue to explore with OYCR. We have been working with OYCR on those other types of options that deal with the misdemeanor youth that are either homeless or having family disagreements at home, that's not the right place for them. So there are a number of options that have been presented to us from OYCR called cool beds that San Diego County is using, that we are very interested in learning more about what that looks like with them.
And I know that we have at least, oh, go ahead, Chief.
So we'll owe you the number specifically there. I thought I had it in front of me, but I just have the LP numbers. A couple of things that just to bear in mind, which is, and we'll provide this information to the board, we'll have to break down, that's not simply what their commitment offense was, but if they're back because they had been released and then they absconded from the new place, that won't show as a new 707B offense, but it's someone who had already been put on CDP, for example. It didn't work, and so they had to come back in. That's an important number to track on the girls because we find placements for them. They're very difficult, but then the persistence, how long they stay, becomes a factor. I'll answer your question with respect to the placements. One of the most challenging things is that we don't have contracts that say, if you're going to enter into business with us, we need you to serve the population that we have. We can't choose who we need you to take. And so there's probably room to be had to say when vendors can refuse, or if we need to enter into different types of contracts that essentially say, we have young people with us that are going to have all of the high-risk markers. And if you can't work with folks that have all of the high-risk markers, then we need to work with somebody else. So what will happen is that there are plenty of vendors out there, but some of our kids are exceedingly challenged with dynamic factors, right, that have to do with conduct. And so they take a look at it and they see this is going to be a disruptor, or this, frankly, just isn't worth the amount of money that you're paying for us. So there's probably room to have some contracting best practices or work to be had with some of our partners and come up with a way of saying, more than simply having more beds, which I think is what we have focused on here, simply saying that it's this type of bed and services that we need, and or if you have a vacancy, we need you to take the young person that we have with whatever challenges they have if the judge is willing to place them there.
Well, in speaking with Dr. Wong yesterday, I know that at least DMH is having some of those conversations with our potential contractors with other populations. And so if we need to have conversations around what placements are available or what kind of settings need to be created, I think that's a conversation this board has articulated. If we need to be creating new types of settings, we need that direction from you all and what it is actually we need in order to help make sure that our young people or anyone in our care is in the right kind of placement for what they're experiencing. And to that end, it's my understanding there's currently one pregnant youth in custody at Kilpatrick. So what are we doing to help get that young person to a different placement?
Yes, Supervisor, the process has been very aggressive from the onset of any time we learn of a pregnant youth in our custody, that they are quickly assembled into an MDT, provided with support, working with the parents, if this is something that was unknown to the family and to the youth, and then the work around finding placement immediately. In this case in particular, when we went back to court last week, there was not a decision by the court to release her. She has another court date coming up next week. We'll continue to work on that. There was some issues in the home that were a little problematic and basically provided some obstacles for us to get her released. But she is being surrounded by care and support there by the staff and the team and through the MDT work.
So do we see that there will be an option for her to go to an alternative placement?
I believe that that's going to come on this next court hearing, but I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket, but we're hopeful that this is moving in that direction.
Okay. I know you've had success with this population and, finding alternative placements, so I just want to make sure that we're continuing that focus, so thank you for that. Another focus that we've had in my office is on our CSEC youth, and I want to turn to the child trafficking unit. This is the third time in the last 6 months we've discussed this topic, and it's still unacceptable for me that there remain unanswered questions about how our department is serving our young people who are going through this experience. Just recently, Governor Newsom signed an executive order focused on preventing sex trafficking and supporting survivors. The executive order made clear that this work can't be done in silos, that we must work collaboratively with service providers and survivors to ensure that survivors are getting the services and supports they need and deserve. Your written report back did not present a plan or explanation of services that we're currently offering these young people. It's my understanding that the PowerPoint you provided speaks to what you would like to do going forward, but I'm still not satisfied by what it is we're doing now. I understand that several of the staff currently in the unit are not full duty staff, meaning they're not directly interacting with youth. So we need to understand what services are available to our young people now, not in the future when probation is more stable. So if there are barriers in place that limit the work DYD or DCFS can do, how does this probation plan ensure that all of the youth eligible for these services are getting them and that we're not leaving state dollars on the table to address this concern?
Thank you, Supervisor. I'm just going to address the component of the staffing piece, and then my colleagues here can address some of the specifics on the rest. I think there's a misunderstanding here. When we use light-duty staff that has restrictions, those aren't restrictions to not have contact with youth, to not provide services, to not do that component. So part of the restructuring of the unit has been aimed at a few things. One of them, making it less dependent on having peace officers, so that because we have a need in the facilities and it's volatile on who can be sent, that the unit can continue to function with non-sworn staff. So the long-term presentation that you've been told is that the unit would be composed of few peace officers, and then probation assistants or analysts would do the rest of it. In the interim, because we still have to promulgate an examination for the PA position, and because we do have plenty of DPO2s that are on light duty status, that the fastest way for us to both keep it full is to use those in the probation assistant area long term. So really, this isn't that the unit is being shorted, it's that the fastest way to get them up and running with more staff was to use light duty. But light duty staff, of course, all have individual restrictions, but typically the restrictions, if they're being put in there, is not that they can't have contact or provide services to youth. They may be restricted from doing things like going to the home, just as an example. That's different. Then you have the staff that is full duty that could do that.
But in this particular unit, sometimes the concerns might be what is going on in the home. And so I just want to make sure that we have the staff who are able to actually fully deliver the kind of service and the level of service that we need.
No, it's a point well taken. This is actually better staffed than most of the field. So we are listening to this is a priority, if you take a look of traditionally what the unit has done and how many of these contacts are being done in the field, and we take a total number of the whole universe that we think that we have, the staffing package that we have now calls for very small caseloads and for the combination of the light duty that'll eventually be non-sworn and the supervisors to be able to do this work. So I don't think we're off in terms of the composition. I think that we have some policy fixes that we need to do. For example, on the side of how we're receiving referrals, some fixes with respect to that. But in terms of the composition, they're not being shorted by having the light duty staff from my perspective.
So are you currently contracted with service providers for this population?
We have a number of service providers that we can contract with from DYD, and
But are any of them actively contracted at this point, or they're just available if you so choose?
Available for sure, and I can't tell you with full assurance that they're already actively doing things. The ones that I do know of from DYD are the Young Women's Freedom Center is teaching a curriculum at CVK called Becoming Me, and ARC.
Specifically for CSEC youth?
Correct. And ARC just hired a credible messenger to work with the post-dispo youth at CVK.
And
as
how
well.
are young people getting referred to these service providers?
So the referral services for the youth in CSEC come from IDC. It's the Intake and Detention Center makes the notification and referral to the CTU, and the CTU sets them up for assessments. At CVK, we have a CTU DPO that is on the ground daily, working through the assessments.
So if SB 794 funds go to probation, but they can go to fund the services that you said DYD is providing, why don't we just transfer the full amount to DYD?
Thank you, Supervisor. I just want to make sure that we're clear that this is not a pot of funding that is actually given to the department. It's a reimbursement-based type of funding, and so you have to incur the costs, submit the claim. It then goes to DCFS, who is our county, if you will, person or entity that's responsible for submitting that claim to the state, and then you are reimbursed those funds. So it's not a pot of money that we can then transfer to another department.
Okay. Several of our community partners have indicated that organizational changes within probation's trafficking program have made it more difficult to obtain timely consultation and support for high-risk youth. So how is the department assessing whether leadership and staffing changes have affected service quality and placement stability, and how are these staffing challenges impacting our young people getting referred to services?
I don't doubt the veracity of that at all. I think that, like every other area in field services, when we've had to move folks into the facility, there have been things missed. It is their communication back to us that is important. We now have a different structure. I think what Chief Deputy Arcos described, an on-site person there, the fact that the superintendent is personally involved and is holding these interdisciplinary meetings, that's how now we're finding areas that could be improved or that were lost. The referral component was a shortcoming on our part in that the majority of the cases were being referred through IDC, when in reality, we should have these other avenues of contracted people for those referrals to come in. That's what they're currently working on now, to make sure that we have a vendor, a third party that is getting those referrals to us, and it's not simply coming from probation staff. That's currently in process to fix that component of it. The funding component is, and sometimes we just have to say things out loud. We have no reason to short DYD or anyone else that is going to provide services. It's been difficult to make clear that we're a pass-through for those funds. And if those services and that is incurred and it complies with the requirements by the state, then we'll pass those funds up. There have been a little bit of growing pains, I think, on multiple sides here. One of them is on what can be reimbursed, and so the accounting has been different. If you're providing for reimbursement, something that the state doesn't allot for, we can't do that. Also, the money then isn't reallocated for probation for use. It goes back to the state. So we want to make sure that moving forward, we're sending as little money back as we need to, but we don't, probation has no gain in maintaining the funds because we can't use it.
Is our DYD director or somebody from DYD here? Just to see if we can connect these dots. And who in probation is leading the reform on CSEC, to continue to be the point person on this issue? Is that you?
It's Director Felicia Davis is the new supervisor over the CTU, and she reports to the acting senior director, Suzanne Lyles, and Suzanne Lyles reports to Deputy Director Gabriela Aguilera.
Okay, so should we be working directly with her or should we be working with you?
Work with me, and I'll make sure that it gets to the right point of contacts on those things.
Okay, so they've been addressing, probation has been addressing that they are passed through for funding that could also go to DYD. So can you talk about what DYD's experience has been and see if we can figure this out? Are you able to take on the support for CSEC youth now, and as so long as you're able to access these funds?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Supervisor. We have been working closely with probation and talking through those sort of growing pains in the process, but are on the same page about what it could look like moving forward, which is understanding the reimbursement limitations, happy to continue to be in that process where we submit for reimbursement as long as we have an agreement about what the amount is up front and what the process is. So if that makes sense for us, we are ready and have been
So
supporting.
can you take on that full,
organizations.
if probation were to give you that responsibility directly and you were able to submit for reimbursement on those funds, can DYD do that?
We have the capacity to do so and are happy to do it at any level, depending on what else is being used with those funds.
Okay, so it sounds like DYD is saying that they can do, are we able to make that transfer happen then?
I'm sorry, Supervisor, when you say transfer, because right now under statute, only probation and DCFS are allowed to submit the claims. Now, we can contract with DYD for the services, and then they submit the claims to us, and then we pass it on to DCFS.
Okay, well,
And that process is occurring. And they have submitted expenditures, I think, up to about 225 this fiscal year. Unfortunately, the deadline for their last submission was not met, and so it will be carried over to next year for submission.
okay. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Chief Deputy Williams and say, when I said we have the capacity, what I meant specifically is we can continue to work with these providers in the process that exists, but we understand, given the statutory limitation, that we can continue to do this reimbursement process with probation, no problem.
So the way it's working currently now is the best way that it can work between DYD and probation?
I think in terms of how the reimbursement works with the state, my understanding is yes, of course, they defer to probation. If it's helpful on the ground in terms of how invoicing works and how we work together as departments, we're actively talking about that and making sure that that's even smoother for 26, 27 to avoid some of these growing pains we felt last year.
Yeah, I think, Supervisor, through all of this, we've all learned a great deal about this process and the billing and how it's relegated to probation and DCFS. I was speaking with Director Carroll a couple weeks ago and Taylor, and I learned a lot about the availability of the services that they provide from CAST LA, LGBTQ Center, the National Center for Youth Law, Zoe International, Saving Innocence, Young Women's Freedom Center. One of the things that David pointed out, though, that was kind of an issue was that some of these providers were billing directly to probation and DYD was never seeing it. So that was creating the delays in the services. One of the things that Director Davis and Suzanne Lyles have put together is they're putting better systems in place to capture these referrals, the services, the metrics, and data behind the service provided as well. So I think we are really strengthening the model that we have now.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot of administrative challenge, but at the end of the day, it's really our young people who don't get served if we don't figure this out. And so my concern is if there isn't more support provided, then ultimately programs might not be able to be provided if we don't figure this out. So I just want...
Yeah, if I could, because I'm a plain English type of person myself. And so the way I would propose to approach it is more of a challenge, meaning a lot of what you've heard is as you said, the administrative portion, how much money is allocated, what fiscal year does it go into? And that's important for us operationally because we have responsibilities, legal responsibilities. But what I would say is that I would invite DYD or the other folks that we have, provide as many services as you can, and then put the challenge on my doorstep to figure out if it exceeds the allotment or not. That hasn't happened. So what's typically happened is that either the services that are being billed don't comply, or we're waiting for the money to be moved up front. But I'd like to approach it the other way, which is, to your point, it's about services for the young people that we have. We already know it's a limited number. It's not going to bankrupt probation or the county. So if DYD, please proceed and go to a ceiling, provide as many services as you can, contract for as many services as you can, and then bill us, and we will pay it. Because this isn't fully reimbursed anyway. It's only a portion of it. So I doubt that we will exceed the capacity that you all want and that the county can pay back to them at this point. If we get close to that, then I'll come back here and say, can we please halt? The amount of money is beyond, and let sort of the county make a decision on that money. So I would encourage proceed, contract for as many services as possible for this population.
And does DYD have any problem with what the chief just said?
No problem with what the chief just said, and just as an example, at the end of last fiscal year, we were able to, as we were realizing we didn't have clarity on the amount of SB 794 funds, we're able to just say, you know what, our providers are ready to increase their services for this important population, and so let's see what funding DYD can put on the table to, reach that expansion.
But what I just heard him say is, go for it, and they're going to figure out how to pay for it.
Well, I think, and maybe I was giving an example of, for us, when we go for it, we have to know that there is funding available so that we're not putting our providers in a situation
So
where they
how
can't
do we square
reimburse.
that?
Yeah,
Because
and I would just say
that's what
from a
needs to get fixed.
fiscal standpoint, we do need to make sure we have a contractual amount because they can't just contract open-ended. It has to be a set amount. So we do have to come to some sort of agreement from a fiscal standpoint on what the dollar amount will be so they can appropriately contract for that amount.
And this is why it is mind-numbing for all of us, I know, to drill down to this level. But I think if we don't figure this out, like this, it's going to take this level of.
No, and we will. We'll come to an agreement on achieving what you both are asking for, but from a fiscal standpoint, making sure it's something that we can contract for and that we can fiscally be responsible and pay for.
Yeah, my challenge is knowing that all of my partners are government entities that know how this works. Nobody's going to come back and say, we billed $2 million. It's going to be, we came up with another $50,000. Now, the devil's in the details. If you come back and you bill for something that's not covered by the state, I can't cover that. So all of that will take coordination here for the board, and I know there's a limit. You can only provide services for the small population, after which there's just nothing left.
Yeah. Well, we gave a motion last week, and I know that I heard a willingness from the chief to figure it out. I heard a desire for us to figure out what the infrastructure needs to be. So I'm going to give you some homework to work with the chief executive officer to report back to the board in 14 days with a detailed report of the total amount of funds available for probation CSEC-related services, including SB 794 funds, net county costs, any other funding used for CSEC-related services. This report should include information for FY 25-26 and 26-27, and work with the chief executive officer to report back to the board in 30 days with a detailed analysis of exactly how probation is using its available funds during FY 25-26, which should include all funding sources, including state, federal, and local funds, and report back to the board in 14 days with a detailed explanation on how referrals to CSEC services are made in probation's current model, including referrals at Campus Kilpatrick, and how that referral process is impacted by staffing shortages and limitations in staff availability, the time between a youth asking for services and a completed referral, and how many referrals probation made for CSEC-related services during fiscal year 25-26. I'm committed. I feel my colleagues remain committed alongside me, to focusing on the care being provided to our youth. I heard expressed a desire to get there, but I don't see yet the tools and organization that's necessary to get to where we need. So I think I need to see how you're putting it all together in order to help us get there and make sure that the desire that the chief expressed to just have services go and make sure that we have the resources to support it, that's ideally where we need to be. And so I think these are the pieces that are going to help fill in the puzzle for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Janice Hahn.
Oh, thank you, Hilda El Solis. Thank you, Supervisor Horvath, for kind of drilling down on that, because I know my staff has also been concerned about that. I feel like the only missing piece on it, and I'm not sure it needs to be the report back, but it seems like there was the amount of funding that's available, and then there was the services that may be unreimbursable because they're outside of the guideline. I feel like that still is the missing piece for me, is to make sure that DYD understands which services are reimbursable and which is not. That I haven't heard.
Well, that's why I included NCC and other funding, because they may not be reimbursable under that Senate bill funding.
Right, but still I feel like that's
paid
a little bit of a
other ways.
miscommunication. But I do respect DYD for saying we can't just go out and do services unless we are sure that they will be reimbursed. So I feel like that's also the missing piece, and maybe probation can work on making sure they understand what is and what isn't reimbursable in terms of those particular services. So again, my staff and I are focusing a little bit on the intake and detention. And so thank you for the data that we got in this report. I know a lot of work was put into it, especially because of the many challenges with data collection. And just to reiterate the fact that, I believe the more we can invest in decarceration, the better off everyone is. When we release youth who are safe out of detention, who are safe to be out of detention, the numbers at our facilities will go down, making it a better, less chaotic environment for the youth who remain there and for the staff who are there to care for them. And this data in this report shows that since the early 2000s, youth incarceration in California has gone down significantly. But the report also tells a story that the youth who are currently detained must be detained, and there is little else in the department's control to release more young people. So I just have a few questions about that. So I understand that probation must detain certain youth after they are arrested at intake because of mandatory detention requirements like youth with 707B offenses, bench warrants, and firearm crimes. But the law, as I understand it, does not require probation to recommend detention after intake at that initial detention hearing in front of a judge. In fact, it's probation's legal obligation to only recommend detention when youth would pose a risk to either themselves or the public if they were released. So I'm just curious, do you think there is times when probation in the past has recommended detention in front of a judge that could have been a recommendation for release?
Absolutely. I am sure there are times when probation has erred, and or there could have been more work done to find alternatives to present to the court. I mean, ultimately, if you take a look at the same data, for example, on the CDP on the front end, we're recommending more releases for CDP than the judges are accepting. It's also possible and likely that we've made errors in the other direction. We've recommended releases or released on our own. We don't know, because we don't really have a sophisticated way of looking at recidivism or to see if our judgment for risk is been on point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The data shows that of the 62 times probation recommended a youth be placed on ankle monitor at their initial detention hearing, the court concurred with only 36 of those recommendations. However, this data does not show the number of times probation recommended detention, but the court ordered release. So in other words, there's times when the court is more conservative than probation, but there are also times when they're more lenient. And I'm wondering, do you have the data that would provide that whole picture, both the times you recommended release and the court disagreed, and the times you recommended detention, but the court ordered them to be released either at home or on an ankle monitor? And could we see that?
Yes, Supervisor Hunt, I think we can get that for you. But I think what is also important at this time, our director over IDC, Director Marroquin, has been providing training to the court on the LAD scores. We're entering the LAD scores now on the court reports, which are much more helpful to the court officers. I know there's another belief that they want some more information related to that risk. But that is the direction that the IDC has been going with the training to the court officers, to the public defender's office. We've appeared in POC with Director Marroquin at least 3 consecutive times, I believe, to continue to answer the questions from the POC on how we can strengthen it and make it better. I know this board has asked a number of times of what does decarceration look like at LA County Probation? And we are really drilling down to that. There are 10 focus areas for juveniles with 47 KPIs that we've initially identified to see how does that all interplay? How does it work? How is each section, each unit of probation working towards that end? And then we've also gone another step towards adult supervision with 11 focus areas and 30 KPIs as well. It's like, how do we help them successfully release and discharge from supervision? So we're thankful for the focus that you've been placing on the department, and we are drilling down to look and give you better answers on what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, again, with all of our challenges, I just think, less population in our facilities is always better. It's better for compliance, better for our staff particularly, and it's better for the young people who are in our custody. So
Supervisor, could I just add one thing, because I know that maybe I've mentioned it here before, or maybe you've heard it at POC, is also the intake officer is turning away a large majority of requests from law enforcement also to detain. So I think sometimes that is not captured, and we're trying to do a better job on our reports to show what that looks like. I know for a 7 or 8 month period, it was almost 700 turnaways, and we asked the local law enforcement to cite and release. So that's another area that we really we do take.
So maybe on the next report, we can get a more complete picture. Let me ask another question. So a large number of our girls and gender-expansive youth are detained on bench warrants. So this means they did not commit a new crime, but are detained because they did not follow the conditions of their release or didn't show up in court. I mean, my team thinks we could make some more headway in decarcerating our facilities if we made progress in this area. Is there an opportunity here to advocate to the courts to change their bench warrant protocol? So either probation or the courts could use more discretion when determining whether it is necessary to detain youth who have bench warrants.
Yes, Supervisor, and part of my expression of saying that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. I believe that we need some discretion. And I know that Judge Espinosa has been very open about it and wants to engage in more conversations. So we're hoping that we have much more, deep conversations about that and what that would look like. Because we also have to weigh what that does to the youth who we're releasing as well.
I mean,
but we'll take it. I think we have a lot of room there.
Yeah, well, if there's anything that this board could do to also support that in our mission to, again, if possible, particularly for the girls, to keep them from being reincarcerated, we would be happy to help you in that effort. So thank you. And again, thanks again. I meant to open up with this. Thanks for again, opening the pools. Big, huge step in the right direction, particularly this summer. And I was pleased to know that our compound youth are able to swim, because before that was off limits for them. And I really appreciate that compound. And even though we We blacktopped the basketball courts, which is better for playing. It seems like it has increased the heat in that compound by 20 degrees. It just feels a lot hotter in there. I mean, they're not out all the time. Obviously, they're in luckily air-conditioned units, but really appreciate the fact the pools are open. I do hope we can make some progress on the swimming lessons, because there's a lot of young people who don't know how to swim, and it's such a skill that I believe everyone should learn how to swim. It's a sport that you can use your entire life till you're a senior. You can continue to swim. So anything we can do again to support the swimming lessons piece of it, and I was happy to provide the swimming caps for some of the young men who did not want to get in the water without a swimming cap. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Barger.
Thank you. I'll be short and to the point. And thank you, Supervisor Horvath, for bringing up the issues surrounding the youth that are at Kilpatrick and the CSEC protocol and what needs to be done. And I'm still concerned about that. And I guess with the SB 794, I like to keep it simple, and I feel like it's become a little complicated. DYD has a role. You have the providers. You all do the billing. The providers, that is their focus. Their focus is working with this population. So just do it. I don't think that's a big ask. I think what's frustrating is that the providers probably have already come in contact with some of the youth that we're talking about. So, the expectation is to not make this a bureaucratic maze or complicated situation. Just do your job, right? And as far as DYD goes, my question to the department is, when you look at community detention programs, are you working with DYD and other departments to make sure that the youth have the services or programming, or DYD, are you taking the lead on that in terms of making sure that youth that are in the community are getting services and everything that they need in order to succeed?
I can take a first pass at that question. Thank you, Supervisor. I know we have had conversations about that population in particular, youth on supervision, but aren't having an active role in terms of.
What do you see your role? What do you see DYD's role as? Do you view it as a department where we, the board, dictate what we want you to do, or how do you see DYD operating in this county?
Great question. We have a strategic plan, a multi-year strategic plan.
No, but how do you see the services that you provide, the reason why you were set up?
We see our responsibility to be to serve all young people in the county and to reduce the size and scope of youth justice system involvement.
So I would suggest that you work with all departments, including DCFS, to make sure that we are connecting youth to the services and programming, so that your strategic plan is to keep them out of the system, that you keep them out of the system. Because if we're putting them in community detention programs and we're not providing them with access to resources, which, by the way, I'm sure my colleagues could talk to their team and could tell stories about parents who call desperate to have their child put into something so that they don't end up in our camps and they don't know where to turn. They are desperate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do just want to raise, I mentioned the specific conversation about community detention programs and youth on supervision, but we do have a wonderful program called Reentry Action for Youth, or RAY, that does overlap with this population that we took initiative to start and find funding for and expand. And that program is really promising to meet this need, and we are constantly looking at ways to expand it, exactly to your point, Supervisor, about how we can take initiative, collaborate with other departments, and do what you're saying.
So what portion of the Care First dollars do you get, the Measure J dollars? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but we could absolutely get it for you.
But you get money, correct?
We do.
And that I would think, rather than waiting for probation to say we need this, I would think that you would team up with all of our departments, and you've got resources allocated, and quite frankly, that's what the resources are for. I mean, I did not support Measure J, but I did support the fact that we should set aside money to invest in our youth, whether it be in programs like Homeboys Industry or Boys and Girls Club or Big Brothers, Big Sisters, whatever it is. But I just hope that we're more proactive, because when I ask that question, I would think that automatically the answer would be we have linked, the minute we find out a youth is put into a detention program, here's what we do. We reach out to the family, we do this, and all that kind of stuff. And if that's not being done, I think that's a missed opportunity for us. And I'm not trying to be hard on you, but I mean, in just listening to all the discussions here, I keep saying it, keep it simple. I mean, look at it through the lens of these are youth that are just that. They are going to be released into the community, whether it is when they finish doing their time at our camps or our halls, or they're put out on diversion. That's our one opportunity to make sure that we help them turn their lives around. And it doesn't define who they are moving forward. And I just don't want to lose that opportunity. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have a lot of questions, and I thank you, Supervisor Horvath, for really drilling down on the funding for SB 794, because I do have questions about that and wanting to make sure that we cut through the red tape. And it seems like needs to be more clarity in terms of what can be paid for services that DYD is wanting to provide. But you should be upfront, meet, collaborate, talk about this is in the the standard, or this is the metric we have to follow, so they're not spinning their wheels. And meanwhile, we're getting the money accordingly prepared. And I get it that you have to pay out, get the receipts for what their service is, but is there a way to get a little smaller task force involved in just that, administrative staff, your administrative staff, probation, and your fiscal side as well, DYD, to get this going? Because I mean, we should not be leaving anything on the table at all, and we can't afford to. And the numbers should be better. We should be lowering our numbers. And I get it that you're talking about, Guillermo, about the women that have some issues that are really difficult. They may come from torn homes, they're trafficked, or they can't go home because they don't have good relations, or they were homeless. So I really want to see that we have the right type of counseling, and that's a standard that's higher, and that's where we need to have the professional clinical help available, but to be able to assess and diagnose these students, I call them students, appropriately, so that we're not just handing them off like that or sending them to people that may not have the appropriate licensing skills to treat the individuals. Because we're talking about a life of maybe 17 years where this young person may have been traumatized. It's not going to happen and get cured in one session, but it should be something that's done methodically, that's charted, and we can see progress being made and all of that. And I know you know all that, but I'm just saying that to me, it's not a large number, so we ought to be able to try to deal with it. And with the young girls, again, sorry to hear that we have a young pregnant woman there, but again, I don't think she needs to be there. And I think you need to try harder on getting some other appropriate care for her, and work with whoever it is, the courts or whatever it is. And I'm a little concerned about the stigma that I kind of hear about the girls that were at LP, that they're the same ones that got transferred to Kilpatrick, and they have these issues and concerns. The settings may be different, the person is still the same, but the treatment has to change. And if the treatment doesn't change, you're not going to get any results. So that's just what I'm talking about from Hilda Solis. And I do care about Camp Kirkpatrick because I represented it for many years, more than 7 years. And I was always in awe of the services that they provided and the faculty that were there. And Kirby, I'm sorry, having a moment here. Kirby, that really gave full attention to their students. They knew them by name, they knew their capacities, they knew what their reading levels were, and participation. If you could set that standard at every camp or every hall, then I think you have a winning ticket here. But I don't see that happening. And I know you have to call on other departments and resources, but maybe there has to be something very dramatic that happens that says this has got to be the standard and we're not going to tolerate anything different. And you'll see results from students, because I do remember visiting there several times and having discussions with students who said this was the best thing that could happen to them. They were so motivated by, not by themselves with their peers, but more importantly by faculty. And they were actually being attentive to them and knew them probably better than their parents did, I would imagine, because there was trust. And that's something, I mean, I know that students there our youth stay there for a certain amount of time, but that time's precious. And I would say we really need to have a come to Jesus meeting about how we deliver these services to these kids. And I get it. You're responsible for state funding, formulas you have to meet, and codes and all that. But aside from that, it's the human element. And the human element sometimes, I think, gets pushed aside here, and our outcomes aren't as best as they can be. And that's not to say you haven't tried. I know you have, but I think we have to do more. The population is much smaller than it was when I first started here. So I hope that resonates with some people. Thank you.
It does, Supervisor. You had me at drama. I do attempt to being dramatic like I did earlier in my challenge that came across as fiscally imprudent. But what I would like to do instead is I want to make a couple, just to make sure we're not up here often, and I want to make sure that people at hearing, I'm not misspeaking or they're hearing something differently. Not stigmatizing the population of girls or those that are Kilpatrick. But from time to time, I do have to set the record straight, because there seems to be very short memories that much of what we're seeing there was occurring in our other locations. That's not an excuse for saying that we don't have to do more, because the whole point of this was to make an improvement, not to maintain the status quo. But I do reject that the setting is making matters worse. It's just that we now know definitively in one location what's occurring. But it's not that there's new violence because they're in that location. That was occurring where they were before an LP. And then the last thing I would like to implore the supervisors to consider the following. Probation is going to continue to come here and not provide what you want, which is essentially more releases at intake or more releases and an impact when it's really a judicial decision. But it may be that there are these two other areas where we should start focusing. One of them being, if the majority of contacts with law enforcement and arrests do not result in a booking, what are we doing to make sure that that kid doesn't come around a second time? That's the missed opportunity. It's the prevention. They've already been identified. Because probation didn't take them today, all that means is that we've deferred, because in all likelihood, within the next 30 days, they're going to have another contact because the intervention hasn't been there. If we really want to reduce the population, really it's in that area. And that area it doesn't mean that we're doing risk assessment improperly. It means that we didn't intervene sort of at the first. And then the second is, the juvenile justice system in LA County is missing the in-between, meaning when there's a violation, for example, on a bench warrant, it means that the young person was placed, they left. Simply saying we're going to not produce them in custody really isn't an option, usually, because miraculously there hasn't been another placement or another location. The real question is, what do other jurisdictions do? And jurisdictions have halfway houses in between community correctional facilities that are run by probation that are short of detention, but that are structured so that you don't have to take somebody into detention. You have an option for somewhere for them to go that has 24/7 supervision. That's missing in the LA context. In the LA context, you have to go back into custody so that we can present you before the judge, and then we look for a placement. It's that in-between component that we certainly have not worked on as part of our budget or with our partners to say, stop thinking of it in the direction of going out, but in how they come back in and that recidivism. Is there a place for them that is more than electronic monitoring, but less than detention, in which they can stay in the community and still be presented to the court? I think until we fix that component or those two areas, we're going to keep putting a lot of resources to an area where there's very little juice, but we have these two areas in which we can make a tremendous impact on the population and how the kids are going back into the system.
Forward to seeing that plan and having input, from our partners. I agree with you. I don't disagree with you, but I do think the urgency is now.
And if I may, Supervisor, just to build on what was just said and share a little bit to the earlier conversation about our Reentry Action for Youth program and the way that we are making the best use of the dollars, the Care First dollars we have available. I just want to share with everyone here that, as an example for what the Chief was just lifting up, we do have, for our Reentry Action for Youth program, a pilot co-located at the Inglewood Courthouse, a partnership with Judge Espinosa and probation and the defense agencies and many partners, where the focus really is on this population of youth on community detention and figuring out how we can learn best about what prevention looks like for this population, what kind of wraparound support they need, and how we can innovate to get them the flexible funding that they need for their basic needs, and really think creatively about the particular ways to cut off that pipeline to future justice system involvement. So wanted to share that as well, and happy to share more if
That's
folks
good.
are
It has
interested.
to expand, I would say. And okay, thank you very much. With that, Executive Officer, hearing no more discussion from the board, let's go to public comment.